Do you live, eat, and sleep the hotel industry? Looking to brush up on your game? You've come to the right place. Welcome to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman.
Hey everybody, this is Glenn here, your host of the No Vacancy podcast. I am excited because I have a super special show for you today. That's why I'm running it as a bonus episode. So a lot of the folks that I know in the industry, a lot of the folks that I know and respect in the industry are not here on the call today. Just joking. They are here today in this podcast. They've put together an incredible group called the Hospitality Supply Chain Collaboration Mastermind Group. And this is the best of the best, the top of the industry, the folks that are in it every single day that are helping us build new hotels, design new hotels, make sure hotels have the freshest, most interesting products and are up to the trends that we think about every single day. So they invited me to be a part of this today. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a great conversation with all of these folks on this call over the next 45 minutes to an hour and really get to see and understand what they're doing. And for a little texture to all of you folks out there, they've been doing this now for about a year, and it's their 7th call this year that they're doing. And what they're doing is they're really trying to come together and figure out all these best practices and really understand what all the other disciplines are doing. I think one of the things that we do in life here in the hotel industry is we worry too much about our own discipline, and we don't really think so much about what all those other areas of the business are doing and how we could all come together and be more successful in a unified way. And I think that, in my opinion, is what the Hospitality Mastermind Group is all about. So I am super excited to have everybody here today, and I'm super excited that you guys out there listening to the No Vacancy podcast are going to get a special glimpse into what's going on behind the scenes. So I've got a lot of great people on the call today, and I think we should start it off by me introducing everybody. And, feel free to say hello, guys, when I name you and all of that. First up, we have Mr. Brian Thornton of BGT Designs. He's been a designer for more than 30 years in the hospitality industry, and I know is based in Las Vegas and has had a great career. Brian, you doing good today, I hope?
I'm doing well. Greetings from Las Vegas.
Greetings. Excellent. And then we have Mr. David Messersmith, Director of Hospitality Development for JMJ Development, but you might know them, formerly known as Gatehouse Capital. And he's got a lot of experience in interior design, client development, as well as luxury hotel development. David, how are you, sir?
A big howdy y'all from Texas.
I like that. And at the end of this conversation, David, I want to know where the best place to get barbecue is in Austin, because I'll be there in a couple of weeks. Coming up next, we have Miss Tarlene Davis. She's the principal of Hospitality Angelz, and she's been in the business of procurement for more than 20 years after being in an almost 20-year career in the Navy, and she's a veteran for that. Tarlene, welcome aboard.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi, great to be talking to you on the show, and thanks for everything you do. And also, one of my favorite folks on the procurement side of the business is Mr. Neil Locke of Neil Locke and Associates, a 45-year procurement, dare I say, I'm going to say it, icon, who's been in this business for a lot longer than I'm sure he can believe. Neil, how are you today? Well, all right. We'll take that as Neil is just stunned that he's been in the business for 45 years, so he can't seem to speak. And then up next, we have Tracy.
Sorry.
Did we get him? Was he on mute? Neil, how are you?
Yeah. Doing well. Sorry. The confusion.
No, I'm just glad someone took the smelling salts to you and we were able to revive you in time for the call.
That's what happens after 45 years.
Then we have Miss Tracy Chevalier, Senior VP of Soho Myriad Art Consulting, she's been in the business of art consulting for more than 25 years, has worked on thousands of hotels, and is, of course, a trusted industry insider. Tracy, welcome aboard, and how are you today?
Great. How are you, Glenn?
Excellent. I love these awkward pauses. This is going to make for a fun time. And then, I don't know, did Amanda Jackson, is she on the call today? Did she make it? All right, she is somewhere. Hopefully she's going to call in. Amanda Jackson, the Director of Projects and Business Development with Wilson and Associates. And it happens to be her birthday today as we're recording this. She might be off having too many margaritas and not having a chance on this call. And then finally, Mr. David James, National Director of Sales and Marketing for Astoria Compass, who's been in our business for a good 12 years now and began his career in art consulting and is managing the custom contract furniture company. David, how are you today?
Fantastic. Glad to be here, Glenn. A big howdy do from St. Louis, Missouri, right in the middle of the country.
Excellent. So this is so cool to me. I'm recording this from my office on Long Island, and we got folks spread out all over the country. So not only are we going to be able to understand all the different trends that are going on in the hotel business, but we're going to get exposed to all the different accents that are going on in the business, which I really love. And if you guys are lucky, I might even pull out some of my Brooklyn accent for you at the end of this conversation. But stay tuned. You're going to have to wait for that big one. So I think we should just jump right into it. We're going to do this with in alphabetical order by name of company, so that way everybody feels that we're doing this the legitimate way. Plus, I can't choose who goes first between all of these people because they're all so amazing. So, Brian Thornton, BGT Designs. I want to go to you first, and I'm curious as to what is the big issue that you're thinking about these days when it comes to hospitality design?
You know, Glenn, there's so many things that really run the gamut. And, you know, I could talk about the design issues, but I was on the management side, on the hotel owner side for a while. So I think my thinking might be a little bit skewed, but I'm very interested in innovation and understanding, you know, as a designer, how we integrate innovation. Certainly a lot of the hotel brands now are looking over their shoulders with the presence of, you know, these new innovations like Airbnb and One Fine Stay, things like that, trying to keep up with that. They're doing it through technology. They're also, you know, keeping very much in mind the big picture, the guest experience. And the guest experience, in my mind, begins before you even arrive at a property. You know, you have check-in options, you have reservation apps, everything that's really been driven by technology, or if you want to dial it down, the smartphone. The smartphone controls everything, you know, from, you know, your check-in procedures, you know, how we're downsizing lobbies in some properties that don't have the space, you know, that, well, we don't need to build so much into that. But again, that whole guest experience, in my mind, as I'm learning, is starting with the app. So it kind of makes us think about how we design for myriad different groups of guests that are coming into the property.
So when you're thinking about designing for the guest that's in the Las Vegas market, for example, Brian, and I know you design projects all over the place, but you are based in Las Vegas. How have they changed in the last few years, and what are some of the things that you're thinking about when it comes to creating the newest iteration of a guest room there?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that we tried when I was at MGM, and I'm going back about 12 years now, is every property that we had, and in Vegas Strip, it was about 15 at that time, and every property was assigned a celebrity name. And that celebrity name sort of aligned with the profile of the guests that were coming into the hotel. It drove color direction, texture direction, how open and airy the space might be, how intimate it might want to be, how luxurious. You know, all of those tenets had to come into play when we were doing our global, you know, master planning and designing. And I still think that is probably valid today. I don't know, you know, if those celebrity names are probably we want to associate with, but it certainly helps drive us into how to tailor towards a different guest that we're expecting.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and you know, other industry folks have done that too. I think immediately of Chip Conley, who did that back in the day with Joie de Vie hotels by assigning a magazine name to each particular type of property. I think it helps clarify things. It helps give people a focus. It helps to understand what that point of view is going to be. So, Brian, if I had to ask you, when you're designing a hotel room today, what is the most important feature for you?
Oh, boy. Certainly, you know, that immediate wow factor coming into the room. But, you know, being in Vegas and understanding, you know, what just happened to us just about a year ago now, you know, the horrible shootings that happened on the Strip, security comes to mind. Once you shut that door behind you, and if you're on a vacation with your family or if you're on a business trip, you want that immediate level of comfort in the room. And so that's touching all of the senses, the visual, the oral, how the air feels in the room, the lighting, all of those aspects that touch humans are important to design into that room.
Right. Makes sense. So, Neil, let me follow up with you. When you're partnering with a designer and thinking about today's guest going into tomorrow's guest, how is your job starting to change when it comes to dealing with the stuff that you're purchasing? My guess is you're focusing a lot more on technology, but maybe I'm wrong. How do you see it?
Well, actually, technology is usually provided by the brands, and they have a separate company that takes care of those kinds of things. So from time to time, we may be called upon to issue the purchase order, but all that coordination is really done internally because all the brands have their own specific needs and definitions of what they want to employ. Our big issue today is, I'm guessing a lot of the folks on the call, is the imminent tariffs. I don't know about everybody else, but we're getting inundated with emails from various suppliers giving all sorts of different strategies that they intend to employ with respect to the tariffs. Are they going to charge now? Are they going to charge next year? There's a lot of uncertainty, and that puts a lot of pressure on current deliveries and budgets for the future as well. And you were asking about design directions. I think a lot of us have seen a transition from carpet and guest rooms to LVT. And LVT, as it happens, is going to be affected by the tariffs. The 75% of the LVT in the U.S. is imported, and 83% of that comes from China. So tariffs are really a significant issue that we're dealing with quite intimately at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really important point. So let me do a shameless plug for my hotel design podcast sponsor, Porcelanosa, that does LVT flooring. It's made in Spain, not subject to the same tariffs. So thank you for letting me get away with that one. Tracy, Chevalier, I want to follow up with you in terms of this design. Guest room designs are changing. Art is becoming so important, not just in the room, but outside the room too. How are you working with designers to create great guest experience through design of art?
Well, a lot of it's guided by brand, again. So a lot of what we're doing right now is three-dimensional art in guest rooms, which is a completely new concept that Myriad came up with and has kind of pushed through almost all their brands, including Starwood. That's probably the biggest change that we've seen. Other than that, we really collaborate with designers to come up with the best ideas within somebody's budget. So it could be based on the region of the hotel, the locality, it could be based on a feel. It could be music. If it's in Nashville, it could be any sort of theme. But I definitely think that art sort of is the icing on the cake that guides that experience, so that when you walk through the door, you know what kind of hotel you're in. You know if it's a Four Seasons. You know if it's a boutique hotel. I think art is really what makes that statement about the hotel experience.
Yes.
Or type, I should say.
No, yes, it certainly does. I think it helps clarifies the expectations for the customer as soon as they walk in through visual cues, as opposed to having to, read about it and really think about it. You kind of know by looking at the art that's going on around. So I want to move on to David Messersmith of JMJ Development. David, what is the big topic that you're thinking about today when it comes to hotel development? Because it seems to me that development keeps going on and on and on. Cash for development seems to have been in pretty good condition right now, and it seems the growth to be moderate. How are you seeing it at JMJ Development and then industry-wide?
Yeah, I think at JMJ we're feeling quite confident about the next several years. So much so that I've got this new position. So yeah,
good timing for it. I got to tell you, David, this is the time when I'm jealous of guys like you and the franchise sales guys. It's the perfect point of the cycle to have your job.
Yeah. Without a doubt. And so I think some of the big items that we're kind of keeping our hands on is cost, and looking at construction methods, things such as do do you use modular construction? I was talking to a group the other day that's got weatherproofing membrane that they can put on the skin of the building and do that before it arrives at the job site. And, just things that can speed up the construction process. Just because while construction and the economy is still strong, the cost of money is not getting any cheaper, and so the faster we can get these buildings up, the less interest we're paying. So, or I guess maybe not the less interest we're paying, but the sooner we can start generating revenue to pay off that interest, I should say. So that's really a big driver on my side of the business. And then I think as we're designing these hotels and laying them out, it's really understanding that hotels are no longer just for travelers any longer. And I think we've all realized that over the last several years. A hotel in Dallas, you can go to a lobby of a hotel in Dallas and half the patrons in the bar are probably going to be local business people. So designing these things to accommodate not only the traveler but also the locals that are there that want to have meetings and really one of the processes we're going through now with one of the brands is really thinking about the operational efficiencies of the hotels and how these things are laid out, and then how do not only the guests but also the employees engage with the hotel. And that goes from everything through smell technology, lighting technology, sound technology, at the LED walls that you're starting to see. All of those things are things that are now on our radar that probably were not on a lot of developers' radar 2 years ago.
I want to go back to that modular construction thing. I find that really fascinating, and it's really starting to take off steam. And I learned a lot about it this past spring when I did a podcast with the folks that are handling modular construction with Myriad, for example, and I encourage everyone to check out that interview on the No Vacancy Network. But David, is that changing the way you do your job at all, or does it say, hey, are you able to say, hey, if you do modular construction, it'll be more affordable for you? How does that fit into what you do as a development executive?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways to look at that, and definitely Marriott was kind of I don't know if they were the first, but they were definitely the first big brand to put this on everybody's radar, and so kudos to them. But it is often more cost effective, but B, again, it just goes to the speed of product, how fast you can get to market, and so that's a big impact for developers, how quickly we can get these buildings built. And then additionally, for companies like ours that do a lot of inner city development and urban development, you often just don't have space to have a big laydown area for all your construction materials, and so having the guest rooms pre-built and just delivered on site and plug and play, if you will, that helps alleviate sometimes the need for a lot of laydown space. Yeah,
it sure does, and that's interesting to me. And I was in London this past winter. It was already winter. I was in London this past winter, and I had the opportunity to see them building a hotel called the Stowaway, and it's built from old shipping containers. So it's kind of like a different spin on modular construction, which is really neat because they could actually fit out those containers, put them into place, and then you've got a really unique, interesting kind of design for your hotel. But also, I think when it comes to modular, David, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Citizen M that was the first one to really do it in the States. But yes, Marriott was the first major brand to get behind him. So, Tarlene Davis, I got a question for you. How does modular construction change your job as a purchasing pro, if at all?
It really doesn't change it for us. I mean, because we still have, whether it's modular or historical build, we still buy the same material, the same number of items. So I don't see it as changing how I work at all.
Well, what about the
Just
whole?
Means I have to do.
Yeah, but then let me ask you this, Tarlene. What about the whole notion of having to get things done much quicker than ever before? Because I think David makes a great point that you got to get it open in order to start paying back that bank. So you're in charge of getting stuff to a property as quickly, as efficiently, and as on time as possible. So are you finding that the speed of which you have to get stuff delivered is changing? And if not, how are you seeing it?
No, I don't see the speed is changing. I mean, I think it's always been, or maybe it could just be the projects that I've been selected to work on. But, historically, we always have dates that we need to deliver, and then you have to say to a client, well, we needed to start 6 months ago. So that's not anything new, needing to have product delivered quickly. But what you find is clients now, what I'm seeing is they want it quickly, and then you have to say to them, well, it's going to cost you, there's an upcharge to make that happen. And it's more of, okay, what is that price? Let me know what that looks like. And a lot of clients now will figure that into what they're doing, knowing that they have to pay these expedited costs to be able to maintain the opening date or delivery date that they've got on the book.
Yeah, I remember one major casino resort project that opened that was spent a whole lot of money in order to do that. I'm sure you guys know which one I'm talking about there. But then I got to ask you, Tarlene, what are the big issues that you're thinking about these days when it comes to being a purchasing pro?
For me, there are two things. One are the, impending tariffs. As Neil was saying earlier, every day we're getting something from a different supplier and how it's affecting them. You have a lot of suppliers now that are saying, you know what, we can't honor pricing, so before you cut a purchase order, we need to find out if that particular project is affected by the tariff. So what we're doing is now building budgets. It's just saying to a client, we need to put in a 10% contingency because we don't know. We don't know if the raw material is going to take a hit, if the finished product is going to take a hit. So we're putting that additional line item in there. The second thing that's keeping me awake at night is the fact that I'm seeing a lot more firms, both on the client side, architecture or design, that are pulling in purchasing or attempting to purchase on their own. And it's a little bit scary because, the people that a lot of the firms are assigning don't necessarily have that background. So you tend to have, major things that are missed. And then I get a lot of the phone calls, hey, are we supposed to, charge tax? How do we collect that? Or how do I know if a product meets code? Things like that. So there are a lot of things that as a purchasing agent, you have to know. It's not just, buying, a pretty fabric or a pretty chair. There's a lot that goes into that particular piece. And I'm seeing that a lot of firms are attempting to do it on their own in a way of, trying to save money, but in the end, it's costing them money. So I think it's just, if they would consult with people that have been doing this, for many years, I think a lot of the transition would go a lot smoother.
Well, that seems awfully naive that companies are doing this, Tarlene. Why do you think that they're taking that sort of risk? Is it that naivete, or do they just really think that they're going to be able to beat the system?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think a lot of firms are saying, hey, wait a minute, you guys are going to pay us to design it, but you're going to pay them a lot more. Well, yes, because, it's a lot that goes into just purchasing. There's a lot of times you got to fix that spec to make sure that the client is getting a product that meets code, meets durability. There's a lot that goes into purchasing. And I think a lot of firms see it as, oh, we can buy that or we can do that. I shop for myself. So it is being a little naive. It is being a little cheating the system. A lot of it is, it comes down to greed.
Right.
Just thinking if I can do everything, I can write, a bigger contract. Well, it's not fair to the other trades, whether it's the architect or whether it's the purchasing agent or the logistics team. It's not fair because we all have, spent many years perfecting our craft. So to have someone, water it down, it's a little heartbreaking. So it's affecting how, we see work come in. A lot of times they'll ask for a proposal and then you'll hear, we decided to do it ourselves. So it's a little bit of, I think it's a mixed bag, but it's a little disheartening for those of us that rely on purchasing, or another discipline, as our survival.
Right. Makes sense. David Messersmith, are you finding in development deals, once that deal is signed and they move into the construction process, that there are more and more companies that are choosing to figure out the purchasing on their own, or are you seeing it a little bit differently and maybe they're still relying on companies like Hospitality, Angelz, and Locke and Associates?
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, I think from the developer standpoint, firms like ours, we want no part of that.
Right.
There's just too much risk and liability in it. We'd much rather let somebody, let the Tarlenes of the world handle that, and know that, that's what they do. That, and sure, it costs us a little bit of money, but as Tarlene said, it saves us a ton of headache, and there's a dollar value there. I do see you are seeing more design firms for sure jumping into that space. I'm seeing that a lot, and that is a little bit scary, as Tarlene said, just because you know how to pick out a product and and it's not to diminish the design process, but just because you specified a product, that not all the design firms are savvy enough to know the codes and things of that nature, as Tarlene mentioned, and further the logistics piece of it. That's a little bit scary. Some of the firms I see jumping into the procurement side of the business, I don't think they understand until they've landed one of these deals just how labor intense the logistics piece of this is.
Yeah, it really, the logistics piece, I think, is that people don't really think about. I think they're probably thinking about it from the point of view, I could save X amount of pennies or dollars or whatever it is per item, as opposed to really thinking about all of the work that actually takes to get to that product there on time, in the right condition, and get the property open at the right place. So, Tracy, and I'm curious as to how you see this as well. Are you finding a change in the percentage of clients that when you work with them that are purchasing pros versus just straight to the ownership group?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely an increase in that in design firms walking into the purchasing world, as well as design firms going into the art consulting world. So we've seen that a lot too, which is also something that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
We don't need designers doing our jobs. So, yeah, it's and a lot of times I think when design firms are purchasing, you do a lot of work and then somehow things just go away. That's been my
so how
experience.
How does that change then your job when someone inexperienced tries partnering with you on a project as opposed to one of these purchasing people who have been doing it for decades?
Well, it takes a lot longer, and we get information that's bad, specs that are bad. I mean, if you don't know how to purchase, you're not going to have all the information that you need from an art consultant. What we do is different. Every single job is different. Every single piece of art is different, except for in guest rooms. So it's a lot of work, and every single detail has to be on a specification, including, whether there needs to be blocking in the wall, how it's going to be installed, what kind of medium it is. I mean, and all that requires somebody who's knowledgeable to know that they're asking us with complete details what they want from us. So, like Tarlene and I have worked together for years, and when she sends me a purchase order and or specifications, I'm going to assume from her that everything is going to be complete, whereas with design firms trying to purchase, a lot of times you get incomplete information.
Yeah, and that's a problem, which makes me think, Neil, people must come to you after they've kind of screwed it up a little bit, asking to be saved. Have those situations, and what are you seeing out there when it comes to this particular situation? Then I'm going to ask you something else.
Well, there's no monopoly on good price, so a lot of people think they can buy, as Tarlene said, that pretty chair at a good price, and perhaps they can. We like to think that there's a group of us, including Tarlene, where we get better prices. But price is not the issue here. The issue is the logistics, as Dave said, or the expediting. That's the key to the success of a project. And people who want to buy the pretty chair for a lower price don't understand that they may get a better price from Indonesia, but it takes 15 days longer than to come from China or somewhere else. And how does that play into the delivery, and what can happen at the port, and all of those kinds of things. So that's the critical issue, and those are the kinds of things that we like to try and explain to the clients who are sort of living in that gray area, in that area of uncertainty, and try and discuss the experience and all of the things, as Tarlene said, that come into play, besides just issuing a purchase order.
So then I bet if I was to say, do you have a contact in Long Beach, for example, at the docks? I bet you got a guy.
Well, I'm not allowed to discuss.
Exactly. So you always want to go with the people who have got a guy. And as someone who lived in Brooklyn for 20 years, I know all about having a guy to get things done when you need things to get done. That's for sure. So, Neil, you go on, please.
I'm not naturally from Chicago, but I've been here a long time, so I think like I'm Chicago, if you know what I mean.
I certainly do, Neil. All right. You had talked at the top of the show about this tariff issue, and Tarlene talked a little bit about it as well. This, to me, seems to be a huge issue that nobody is talking about at the major hotel conferences, and I simply don't understand. Is it because maybe, they're just taking the Republican line of things right now, or they're just not thinking about it? I just don't know. But the issue that I see is, Neil, you've got a big problem that you have to deal with. How are you trying to negotiate this sense of uncertainty that's swarming around us in ways that we've never seen before?
Well, the reason I don't think they're being talked about at the industry conferences is that at that point in the deal in the life of the deal, the FF&E and the OS&E are sort of like a rounding error.
Right.
Error. They're not significant until it's time to implement the project.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they're not being discussed.
Interesting.
I think that those guys at those conferences, for the most part, aren't responsible for managing the FF&E and the OS&E.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it gets down to the people either on the developer side or on the brand side, and they start working with Tarlene and me and Tracy and the designers, that's when the problem becomes more acute. And the other thing, of course, is construction comes before FF&E and OS&E, so we are also the last things in. And it's our budgets that get affected the most because we're the ones that have to value engineer and try and squeeze things in that aren't usually enabled to get in. And so these tariffs come in at sort of the last minute, and a lot of the things that are being installed or projects is a real problem. I think 6 or 8 months from now, once it's found its way and everything is at its own level, everything will be a little calmer because everything will be built in. But right now, there's a whole lot of uncertainty, and it's making everybody nervous. I think Tarlene's advice, when you're doing budgets now, you have to put in an extra 10% contingency, and you have to call it a tariff contingency. And if you're doing projects into next year, which a lot of us are,
right,
then you have to some way to analyze and rationalize what could be a 25% tariff.
Jesus. Yeah. I think about some of my friends that are in the supplier side of the business. They're American-based companies, but all of their stuff is made in China. And I feel as if the political situation hasn't considered that by slapping tariffs on the Chinese, they're really hurting American businesses out there. I don't know if you want to get involved in politics at all, Neil, but I see this as a big issue.
Well, the issue in this isn't politics; it's business. Yeah. And what's starting to happen is that little by little, a lot of manufacturers are now migrating to Vietnam. A bunch of them have been in Vietnam for a while, so at least on the case goods side, it's becoming more mature. But there are other products. For instance, there's a major lighting company that's starting a factory in Vietnam that's supposed to be up and running by the end of the year. So I think that's what's eventually going to happen is that the business challenge will be resolved by making a business decision. And if the business decision is to make it in Vietnam or make it in Indonesia or some other place, that's eventually what's going to happen.
That's right. Go on. Sorry.
It's only the acuteness of the problem right now. The imminent unknown is what's keeping all of us up at night.
Yeah, it sure does. As a matter of fact, I think you make a great point about moving to Vietnam. I have a buddy actually who spent the entire summer with his family in Vietnam doing exactly what you're talking about. So I got to go back to David Messersmith. And David, on the ownership side, on the development side, it seems like while things are going good, all of those negative things are kind of conspiring, I think, behind the scenes right now, and it may pop forward. And I'm curious as to what you think with steel tariffs happening, with the price of lumber going up, with the price of construction materials in general going up, and the price of people to build the hotels going up. Not to take away from the point that once you open the hotel, it's going to be more costly to operate as labor costs continue to rise. How do you see that affecting all of the changes in terms of developing new hotels these days?
Well, without question, it's having a huge impact on us, and the challenge for us becomes these projects don't occur. The hotel doesn't get built overnight, so we've got to try to forecast out 2, 3, sometimes 4 years what we think the economy is going to do and how that's going to impact our projects as it relates to cost. So I had a discussion. We had a major GC from Dallas in our office 2 days ago and spoke specifically about where's the cost of steel going? How is that going to impact this project that right now is just it's a concept on a whiteboard, right?
Right.
And so how do we prepare budgets for that? And thankfully, given the background I've got and the experience I've had, the word contingency is front and center. We've got contingencies on everything, and our big challenge is I believe Neil mentioned earlier, the FF&E is often the last kid in the pool, and so that's usually where the budget's got to get creative. Our challenge as developers is we go and present an opportunity to a project to a city, for example, to get permission for zoning and get the city to sign off on it, the local neighborhoods to sign off on it. They've signed off, to a large extent on what is this structure going to look like. And so, it's hard to value engineer that once it's already been approved by the city. So regardless of, if costs go up, you have to deliver what you told the city you were going to deliver. So we've got those types of challenges. And so to some extent, yes, the further downstream you get, becomes more important to figure out how to value engineer, because further downstream you get, your budget gets impacted more.
Yeah, I had that word in my head because I'm thinking I need to do a follow-up question with Brian Thornton about design. Brian, David makes a lot of sense. Neil makes a lot of sense. As prices continue to increase, how are you thinking about designing a hotel these days? And are you trying to value engineer it ahead of time to try to, prevent having to go back and do it again?
Years and years ago, I spent a little time with a really small company called Gensler. And one of the things we learned to talk about for an entire year, it was our kind of like driving force, was agility. Always be out there, be available, be flexible, be able to bend, always have that plan B, C, and D stacked up. And as these tariffs and prices and contingencies go on, I've been working with Tarlene Davis now for a couple of years and, getting immersed in the whole procurement process. And it has absolutely changed how I design. So, tariffs, be damned. I was always expecting something like this. I don't want to be locked down on any product, any material that is dependent, upon coming across the water. When I start my design, I'm looking at things that, can be made locally or at least in North America. So if I need it quickly, I can put it on a truck, put it on a train, put it on a plane.
Right.
We've done that. These are new times. We don't have to always think, it's coming from China. It's cheap labor. We're going to get it, save our clients money. That's not the bottom line, like Neil was saying. The things that, becomes acute, as a problem. I think it's very important for me, especially being, a little bit more seasoned designer. I've been burned too many times before, and I'm not playing that game anymore. There are too many talented people. There are too many talented companies right here in the good old USA that can deliver the things that we need. And I try to educate my clients, if they try to push that down my throat, and it's like, we're going to save so much money and we're going to microwave this process. You can't do it. Once you start skipping those steps, I guarantee you're going to get caught on another end. It's just been my experience.
Right. So again, it's a case of understanding that there are things that you don't know, and respect the professionals are out there, and don't try to save a few cents when it's really going to cost you a number of dollars. Tracy, I'm curious, in the art consulting world, what's the biggest issues that you're thinking about today, either the ones that keep you up at night or the ones that keep you pretty jazzed?
Lead time. We've gone from having
Right.
a normal lead time to no lead time. I mean, we're getting purchase orders that say we need to deliver the next week. And
how's that
right
even
now,
possible?
we're at full capacity.
That's insane.
It was you, Neil. Just kidding.
Tracy, is it because we all get everything in a day from Amazon right now, so it's changing our perception of how long it actually takes to get things done? What's the truth here? What's going on?
I don't know. Ask David. Because it's my understanding it's the ownership that's putting pressure on designers to get the building filled with furniture and art to get them up and running. So, I mean, I'm not sure what is causing this crazy, very short timeline, but I'm guessing it's what David's talking about. It's getting money back in his pocket.
Right.
For, as fast as possible.
So what do you do to negotiate that kind of situation so you don't, go insane and have a heart attack from stress?
Well, lots of times, or I should say right now, we're going back to purchasing agents and saying, what do you really need and when do you really need it? So instead of sending the entire palette of art for the whole entire hotel, we're doing a couple floors at a time, if possible, because most hotels don't shut down and do the whole entire thing at once. We know that. So, and we shift things around. We ask, if another job can be pushed back a little bit to squeeze one in. But right now, we're seriously getting purchase orders, and then they want the art within 3 weeks. We got, and it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
That is crazy. So, David James, let me bring you in on this conversation as a supplier. We've been talking about tariffs and changing delivery dates and all of that. How are you thinking about all of these issues at Astoria Compass?
Thanks, Glenn. Actually, it's funny, the uncertainty that's created by the tariffs. We were seeing with China, not around tariffs, but we used to use Chinese manufacturing and got away from that about 8-10 years ago due to some of the inconsistencies in the product and, of course, lead times, the amount of time it would take. We've shifted to primarily, we're domestic. I'd say 85% of what we do is either done in the U.S. or Mexico. And that also has a lot to do with these lead times that everyone's talking about that are much shorter lead times. Everybody, the hospitality, you do a quote and it's hurry up and wait, and then you follow up, and then a few months later, we need it in 6 weeks. And to speak to Tracy's point, not that anyone in this group would ever ask for anything really fast, but, then it causes another conversation. Do you really need 300 rooms delivered in 6 weeks? Well, can you do a couple of floors? And you have that conversation with them and make sure everybody's on the same page first. The worst thing in this business is failed or missed expectations. When you commit to something and then you call and they're waiting for it sitting on the dock, and it hasn't left the port. It's sitting somewhere else. So we try and have those conversations up front. But yeah, tariffs have certainly caused an issue with that. So we're actually fit pretty well with Mexico manufacturing and U.S. manufacturing. So it works well for us. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and it's the uncertainty that's being created right now because of those tariffs. And we're also seeing a great uptick in business, which we're happy about. But there are going to be components with a lot of the electronics that are brought into a lot of these pieces now, with the power supply, charging ports, that sort of thing. Some of those components are made in China. So it's, some of those pieces may end up generating a little higher price, but it's negligible with it being components. But yeah, there's definitely an issue there.
Interesting. So Tarlene, Tracy is talking about these insanely shorter timelines. It sounds to me that you're stuck right in the middle there between trying to please owners and having to get those products from the actual suppliers. How do you negotiate the changing expectations from ownership in these shorter deadlines? Tarlene, did we lose you? right, so Neil, let me ask you that question.
Oh,
there she is. There she is. All right, so
no. What it is, it's a lot of it is not. The clients have always had crazy deadlines. That's not new to any of us. But I think it's the way you handle the project and the way you set the project up from the very beginning. I mean, if you go into a project letting the client know I need 14 to 16 weeks for cases right off the bat, that takes the pressure off of your manufacturer, it takes the expectation off the client, and then you begin to set realistic schedules. And I think that's what it is. I think people go into meetings and just kind of say yes without really being honest with the client. And I think if you tell...
It sounds to me, Tarlene, you have good opportunity to say it's going to take 16 to 20 weeks to get the furniture in. But if you're really insistent, then I could probably negotiate it down to 14 to 16. That's the tack I think I would wind up taking. But Neil, how about you? How are you dealing with the changing expectations here from owners wanting stuff quicker?
I agree with Tarlene. I don't think the expectations are changing. And I also agree with Tarlene on how to handle it. And it's a matter of expectations, and expectations defined or expectations are realized.
Right.
And if you have frank conversations, frank positive conversations with the entire project team, then generally things will go pretty well. And even if a client's date is not going to be met, if they know when the goods are really going to get there, then and they can be delivered, they're going to be satisfied. But that's a function of the entire project team. It's not just a function of the purchasing agent and the supplier. Folks like Brian have to get involved. The architect has to get involved. The contractor has to get involved, so that everything fits together. And as we all know, this is not a perfect world, and one or two things are always going to get out of whack, and then it's just a matter of good communication, I think, between everybody.
Yeah, good communication is always critical, no matter what you're doing out there in every stage of a particular product. David James, you're the last one who hasn't really spoken about a big issue that you're thinking about these days. What is exciting you or keeping you up at night?
Well, I don't know I think what was keeping me up at night, we've pretty much discussed the tariffs thing, and lead times. I guess what I could add to it is kind of innovation, things that we're seeing that are new or different. Not necessarily new, but it's happening now. The headboards with integrated data ports, lighting, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And a residential feel. Custom envelopes, that sort of thing, in the seating components. They want it to look residential, but of course maintain a contract rate. So we're seeing a lot more of that now. As far as staying up at night, it's we've got a lot more business coming in, and managing that in a lot of these quick timelines. To be redundant, really is making sure that we have these conversations with our clients to make sure that we meet the project deadlines and make sure that we're meeting the true design intent and that everybody is on the same page. Specifications aren't always as clear as we'd like from the get-go. As a custom furniture manufacturer, some specs are better than others. Some people write specs better than others. So it's about interpreting those and getting them out back for review. And then again, making sure we're making exactly what it is they want and hitting the deadlines that they want to achieve. So yeah, that's pretty much what I see for what's keeping me up at night.
Yeah, well, makes a lot of sense, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I think we're at the point now where we could start to wind down the conversation. I would love for each of you to just give me one final thought, either based on anything we've been talking about today or something completely different that's at the top of your mind. So we'll just go in the same order. Mr. Brian Thornton, what's your final thought?
I guess I've heard a lot of really great thoughts and all kind of circling around the same theme, delivery to our clients, and but I think the overarching thought, from my standpoint, certainly is communication, being honest, being genuine. I can't tell you how many times in the last few years, post-recession, where so many things have been misconstrued because people aren't speaking to one another. They're not talking to one another. They're sending things in email chains buried far down, and you're not getting to the gist of the issue. I am very much a believer of going old school. If you have a quick question, pick up the damn phone. Call me. Let's not guess about anything. Let's not interpret, what we thought we read, in an email. And I can't tell you how effective that has been, just picking up the phone, talking to my suppliers, talking to my purchasing agent. Oh, my God, that's what you really meant. Talking to the owner, well, we really didn't need it that soon. And talking to the architects and the contractors. Oh, well, that's what you meant. Okay, well, that can't happen. You can't put that in yet because the product hasn't even been made. And sitting down at that table and having everyone understand that process, because we're moving fast, people, so let's make sure we're all, one, telling the truth, and two, letting everyone know what's really important for their aspect of the project.
Right. Terrific. I think that's absolutely terrific. David Messersmith, your final thought.
So two final thoughts. Franklin Barbecue in Austin is what you want to take a look
at. When you're Thank you. The most important piece of information of the entire call. Okay, go on.
Wanted to get that handled for you. Number two, as it relates to these deadlines, I think, I look at it as a couple ways. From an ownership perspective, if you're regularly getting these really tight deadlines, 3 weeks for art, or you need to kind of look. It's not like the owners are walking through a hotel and 3 weeks before it opens, it goes, "Oh, dadgummit, guys! You know what we forgot? We forgot things." That's very unlikely. So right. if you're getting that call, it's because somebody screwed something up. So it could be an opportunity for you to, I would look at it as an opportunity. If you're getting the same call from the same people on a regular basis, that's poor project management. I'd look at it as an opportunity, unless it's happening from the same people on a regular basis.
Excellent. Tarlene Davis, what about your final thoughts over there from Hospitality Angelz? Tarlene? All right, Neil, how about you? Final thought?
Yeah, I agree with Brian that email is good and useful, but I'm old-fashioned, and since, as we all know, I started when I was 0, and I've only been in the business 45 years. I believe in picking up the phone, and I think if I can riff off of what Dave said, I think a lot of good planning is important to the success of a project, because and with good planning means it's more economic and more beneficial to everybody, because I think we would all agree that it's better to pay the time god than to pay the money god.
Yeah, you got that right. That's a great way of putting it. All right, Tracy Chevalier, what's your final thoughts?
I'm leaving because I have a meeting downtown, so thanks, everybody. I apologize for jumping off.
Thanks, Neil.
Bye-bye, everybody.
All right, yeah. Tracy, go for it.
Well, after this conversation, I really think that a lot of it has to do with experience. So if you have a purchasing agent that's experienced, you're more likely going to have like a smoother ride, and maybe designers that are more experienced. I think part of the problem right now is that we have a lot of young designers that don't know what they're doing and waiting for answers from more experienced designers. So what I take away from this whole conversation is that you should really work with experienced people.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think you're right on target. So, final thought, Mr. David James, what do you think?
Thanks, Glenn. Two things: the uncertainty we've talked about in the with the tariffs and all that, and we've discussed this in previous calls. Is because right now it's just we don't know what's going on. It seems like that might work itself out in the next 9 months to a year, and And the other real final thought that I have about this is the whole intention of this particular call that we've been doing for the last 7 months. The design of it is so that we can all, rather than linearly, I'll have to learn how to speak that word, one-on-one as a group through the whole value chain, we can really understand how and why people are doing what we do, collectively, individually, and as a group, and hopefully improve the whole process. Understanding what other formats or other roles in the industry do helps us all to improve our own processes to interpret what it is everybody else needs along the value chain. And I'm just glad to be a part and be with this group and help put this together.
Excellent. Well, what a great conversation this has been. Now, this is why they're called the Hospitality Mastermind Group, because they have got it down. And I hope you all out there learned as much as I learned today. What a fabulous, interesting conversation. I'd love for you guys to let me know what you think. Like us on our fan book page on Facebook. That's No Vacancy Podcast, No Vacancy News on Facebook. Let us know what you think of this conversation. You could drop me a line at Traveling Glenn on Twitter, at Traveling Glenn on Instagram, or even drop me an email, Glenn@rouse.media. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think about this group, what you think about what was said, and what your opinions are, because I'd really love to have these folks back on again to talk about the issues that you find most relevant, the ones that you find most important. They're the ones that are going to help make the biggest difference in your careers and your livelihoods. Man, what a great conversation that was. I think I'm going to be grooving all night just thinking about this, but probably getting a little concerned about those potential tariffs out there. So thank you guys so much for listening, and for the Hospitality Master Group and myself, Glenn Hausman, thanks for listening, and I'm going to be back next week, that is, unless I get lost at Franklin Barbecue. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman, online at rouse.media, on Twitter at Traveling Glenn, and on Facebook.com/Glenn.Hausman. We'll catch you next time.